everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar on managing your cybersecurity risk. My name is Marika Deemer, a marketing coordinator here at Action Associates. Just some quick housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be recorded, so you are muted. The link to the recording will be sent to you automatically shortly after the webinar finishes. During the presentation, please use the Q&A feature to ask any questions, and we will be happy to answer them at the end of the presentation. If you have any technical issues, also use the Q&A feature, and we'll be happy to try and help. Also, we've provided a post-webinar survey, which is already available in your webinar console. Please fill that out as your feedback is important to us. Now let me introduce you to our presenter today, Mike Kaufman, our Vice President of the Managed Infrastructure and Cloud Services Division here at Action. Mike, I'll let you give more of an introduction and get to the content.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate the intro. I'm Mike Kaufman. I'm the Vice President of our Managed Infrastructure and Cloud Services Division, as she said. Started life here at Action as a sales rep, but before that, I was a network engineer for about 10 years, working on a lot of the products that Action sells and implements today. Actually survived 2 acquisitions and grew into a role here with Cloud Managed Services and have found really that this is an area where I have a lot of passion, a lot of excitement as we were growing, from those 2 businesses or practices into our cybersecurity practice. I found more and more great information, to share with our customers, more products and services to bring to market, and we've really had a good time bringing this practice into being. So today I'm really here to talk about managing cybersecurity risk. What I found is that a lot of the customers that we talk to don't necessarily have a great understanding of where risk lies or what's going on out there in terms of the cyber threat landscape. And so we have an opportunity to talk a little bit about that today, and how folks perceive where they are versus where they truly are. Today, my goal is to share some of the things that I've learned about cyber threats and real risk, to talk about 5 key practices that I think as sort of a starter to becoming more cybersecurity, to improving a cybersecurity posture, are a great way to move forward. There's some other information here I'd like to talk through, just kind of creating a culture of awareness. So how to speak to your staff, your team members about really being aware of the threats that are out there, and then create a culture of questioning, a culture, I don't want to say suspicion, but to create a culture of curiosity in terms of things that look anomalous or might be a potential threat, and then to question those things before engaging with things that could potentially be harmful. And then we're going to talk about some effective incident response strategies. When you find yourself in a place where something has happened, how do you respond, and what should you do in order to protect your business, and in order to mitigate whatever's happened there. So I think a little bit about Action Associates to kind of kick us off. I think I looked at the list, and most of you that are attending today are Action customers already. You may not know that we were established over 40 years ago in 1979, and we started as a hardware, as an infrastructure-based company, as resellers of infrastructure. And over time, the leadership of the organization realized that the value that they could offer with just the hardware was multiplied tremendously by packaging or combining that expertise with ERP expertise. So they grew into verticals like construction and real estate management, into distribution, pick, pack, and ship, into architectural engineering services, into manufacturing. So we have, and again, all of you probably know, we have divisions that source or support each of those verticals, that sells and implements ERP products within each of those industries, and becomes a full IT partner with our customers running those products. Of course, the Managed Infrastructure and Cloud Services Division, MICS for short, we have grown up alongside those divisions as well, and provided infrastructure support, networking support, and management, IT, security, cloud services, all of sort of the IT infrastructure back end that can help our customers both optimize their own networks, or even have us come in and help augment staff and help manage those environments, or even to become kind of a full IT solution for those customers. So what's nice is that because we've been doing this with our sister divisions for so long, our engineers are really pretty steeped in experience in terms of understanding those industries and understanding the applications that are running there. So when we make recommendations, when we architect a network, when we help to optimize certain types of connections, when we help to optimize security, we're doing that with an awareness of what's needed in that business to stay running. So lets us solve problems quickly. We can be a full partner there. So I think, jumping into the idea of cyber threats and risk, why is this important to our partners? And I saw some names on the list that I recognize today, and I'm really glad to have you all with us. Some of you guys fit the SMB mold pretty well. I saw a couple of names from some of our larger customers on there as well. Glad to have you with us. I know that all of you are here because you're interested in finding out more about your risk. And hey, I've got some really interesting things to share with you today. In terms of small to medium businesses, small businesses were the victim of 70% of the ransomware attacks in 2021. Those numbers change a little bit, over time, but that's a significant number. And I'll talk in a little bit about why it's often perceived by small business owners that maybe they're too small, or they're not likely to be the target of a cyber criminal. But we found actually that's not the case. Those cyber criminals are targeting the places that have the least investment or the least preparation to protect against a cyber threat. But they're easy, it's low hanging fruit. It can be easy for a cyber criminal to grab a quick ransom to put a business at risk in order for their own gain. So 75% of small to medium sized business owners say they would only be able to survive, or they would only be able to survive, a week of an outage from ransomware. We've recently worked with companies that have toughed it out through an even longer ransom period. They had worked with the FBI to pay the ransom, and then the actual decryption of the data after it had been encrypted, it was several days. So it wasn't the case that those folks actually got access immediately back to their data just because they paid the ransom. The actual decryption process, once they even had the decryption keys, took several days and prevented them from making the changes that they needed to in their environment to begin operations again. So long-standing, difficult situation, and they were able to tough it out, but a lot of businesses don't have enough cushion to be able to do that. 47% of businesses under 50 employees were reported not to have a cybersecurity budget at all. Now, that's not to say that they have no cybersecurity spend. A lot of times they'll have some type of anti-malware, they'll have some type of protections. Maybe they're using Microsoft's built-in, Defender, or they're using advanced threat protection through their 365 accounts. But in terms of budgeting, they hadn't specifically allocated to protect themselves from one of the fastest growing threats to a business these days. And in fact, that number only goes down to 35% when you move up to the next, the next tier from 50 to 249 employees. So, this is an area where, there's still room for growth in terms of cybersecurity awareness, and in terms of, actually a deliberate and intentional process for protecting a business from a cybersecurity threat. And 36% of all small businesses are not concerned about cyber attacks. Now that is from 2022, and I suspect the events of the last 2 years have probably lowered that number. I think the folks that I talk to at least acknowledge that there is risk. They don't always say that they're concerned enough to invest for their business, but they understand that it's a risk, and sometimes it's a risk they're willing to take, and sometimes they see the value of putting some protections in place. But the upshot of the surveys that we've kind of been using to inform our discussions with our customers is that 51% of small businesses in some way or fashion have left customer data unprotected. And I think that's a stat that should make us all take pause and consider what does that mean to our business? What could it mean to our customers? What could it mean to our reputation? So I love this slide. One of the really interesting things I think about cybersecurity is that businesses that get breached, there's a stigma associated with with admitting to some type of cybersecurity incident. And if someone's home is broken into, it's not that we feel sorry for them. We have sympathy for someone whose home is broken into. They either whether they live in a nice gated community or they live in a different area of town. Getting broken into doesn't really attach the same stigma that getting a business having a business security incident does. So, what we find is that because of that, because reporting or advertising or sharing a compromise can lead to a significant loss of reputation. Sometimes, if they're not required to, businesses won't report a loss. They won't report a compromise or a security incident. And what that leads to is the appearance that businesses of the same nature, of the same size, in the same geography, aren't really experiencing cyber attacks. Business owners might not be aware that their peers or that their competitors have undergone this. And so they think that they're actually living in the nicest area of town, which we see on the left here. This is a safe neighborhood, and all the homes are well laid out. But in reality, they don't know that all their neighbors have been broken into, that all those folks have had to pay a ransom or have had some type of cybersecurity incident that they have needed to respond to. So it kind of an interesting concept here. How would you feel if all your neighbors had break-ins and didn't tell you about it? And you discovered that, you'd feel that you were less secure than you did before you had that knowledge. And that's kind of what our understanding is as well, is that there are a lot of cybersecurity incidents that are going on every day, a large number of attacks. And I could quote statistics about every 7 seconds another ransomware attack is executed. But really, it creates a false sense of security, and that's something that we find it's important to share with our customers who are trying to determine what is my risk, what is the appropriate amount of investment for myself or for my organization to protect ourselves against cyber threats. So no business is too small for cyber criminals to target, and the fact of the matter is that cyber criminals aren't just here in the U.S. Cyber criminals are located all over the globe, and many of the economies in which they exist are not as robust or are not as wealthy as the U.S. economy might be. And so what we find is that folks that are maybe in Mexico or Costa Rica or the Ukraine or any of a number of different countries might have a different scale of income. They might have different cost of living. And what we found is that in those economies that even small ransoms can really be life-changing money. We recently had a meeting with a vendor who told a story about some orphans that he sponsored in the Ukraine. A couple of the orphans that he sponsored were graduating from high school. So he went over there basically after the graduation, he gave a little speech at the graduation and then took really the entire, top 10% of the class, I think he said, out to eat at the most expensive restaurant in the place where they were. And when the bill came, it was, less than $125, to feed, dozens of people. That just kind of puts in perspective, how even a small ransom could really, go a very long way in an economy that has a different scale than the one we do. So, something to keep in mind, that cyber criminals will go after the least protected, the easiest targets, no matter the real size. So I have a few stories to tell throughout the presentation, and this one I think is really interesting. So one of our partners shared the story with us. There was a young lady working at a mortgage company who got her credentials phished. And there was no real, apparent immediate repercussion. She had to receive an email, and she went to the website and put in her credentials, and they suggested she change her password through that process. And now the cyber criminals had those credentials. They didn't have multi-factor authentication turned on. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But these bad actors, they got into the Outlook account, they monitored the email, they figured out this mortgage company was doing business with a couple of law firms. One of them had an L in the name, so they went out and bought the domain name with the same letters, except they substituted a capital I for the lowercase l, looked exactly the same. They determined that a closing was coming up on a Thursday. On Tuesday, they emailed this contact and said, "Hey, we're looking forward to seeing you at the closing on Thursday. By the way, we have a new escrow account. Please put the money here." The contact or the victim, looked at the email address. It looked legitimate. Didn't recognize that the L had been substituted with an I, and wired $250,000 of a family's money directly into an account where it vanished immediately. So come Thursday, everyone realized that the money was no longer there. The owner of the mortgage company had to fork up out of pocket using his home equity, line of credit, put his home at risk, put his business at risk. But without that, he had the option of either going out of business or having a major reputational hit. It was a major deal. So, and hey, they were just doing, in the normal course of business, what they would have expected. Nothing out of the norm. But one compromised email address and some diligent sleuthing by the cyber criminals and a well-executed con ended up with this company at risk. They ended up having to take a loss over, basically take this out of the profits for the next 6 to 12 months. So the small to medium-sized business sector is a prime target for cyber attackers. There a lot of times companies don't recognize the value of the data that they have, and it's valuable in two different ways. One, there could be some value to the information itself. So it could be the case that maybe there are credit card numbers, or maybe there's personal details that could be used for identity theft, or maybe there's things that could actually be used by criminals for a separate profit enterprise. But also that data is valuable to the company itself, and that's the whole idea behind ransomware, right? That you could find yourself in a situation where, without access to this data, without access to project plans, without access to customer communications, without access to accounting data to find out, who owes you money or who do you owe money to, reputations will be damaged. The ability to actually transact business will be damaged. So there's a lot of value, both intrinsic and sort of extrinsic to a lot of the data that our customers have. So that's a key piece of this. But also, there's an attack surface issue. When customers have more and more complex systems, it's harder to secure every facet of those things. It requires some real diligence and some really good planning in order to protect those things. And then with the advent of the remote workforce, that's grown since the pandemic. More and more folks have either moved their place of work into the home or outside of the office, or they're working in a hybrid mode these days, which has kind of become a little bit more the norm. Again, that kind of creates a greater attack surface. It creates some greater areas for cyber criminals to gain a foothold and maybe to get access to something that they shouldn't. So things to be aware of overall. I want to shift gears a little bit here and talk about some of the best practices for cybersecurity. And these are going to be fairly basic steps. I'll talk a little bit later at the end of the call for some of the more in-depth steps and controls that we at Action are using to help secure our customers. But just as a basic, hey, I need to get started in cybersecurity. What are kind of the first 5 things that I need to put in place? And we might talk about these as what are the basic protections? What are the seat belts and airbags of cybersecurity that I might need to put into place so that I can begin protecting my business? So the first thing, when folks in cybersecurity talk about how to protect or how to begin improving the security posture of an organization, the phrase people, process, and technology comes up a lot. Because the folks that are in your organization are always going to be a key piece of your security strategy. So one of the things that you can do is educate them in a way that helps them be more curious about things that might be a risk. Educate them on what phishing emails look like, educate them a little bit on, what happens when they receive a request to provide a password or those types of things. I put in the presentation here that employees can often be the weakest link in the cybersecurity chain, and I'd say that they're the most flexible. To you, I'd say that having a good program, a solution in place for employee education is really key. Here at Action, we've got our preferred products, but there are a number of them out there. Really, a program that allows you to test the knowledge and experience of your employees in terms of cybersecurity. We can run phishing campaigns. We can send them emails that if they click, we can discover who's the weakest link. We can help them by providing video training, by providing information about, hey, so we want to let you know you clicked this link, and here's why you shouldn't have, and here's the reasoning behind that, and here's a good way to avoid getting caught out by this in the future. This time, no harm was really done. In the future, if it were a hacker or a cybercriminal, you might find yourself in a situation where information had been compromised and the business could be damaged. So having those micro trainings, a platform maybe to see who has taken the micro trainings, who has passed little quizzes, or who has clicked or not clicked on test phishing emails. All of that could be a very useful platform for an organization to begin securing their infrastructure and their data. So this next one, I think, is also one of the key elements of improving cybersecurity. Implement multi-factor authentication. I can remember being at a conference probably about 12 years ago, and there was a gentleman from NASA who was talking about security and technology, and he talked about the fact that and especially at the time it was true. We're getting better over time at this, but at the time it was really true that there was kind of an inverse proportional relationship between convenience and security. And the more secure something was, the more difficult it was to use, the more steps that had to be gone through to actually access data or information. So multi-factor authentication, when it first came out, folks found it pretty cumbersome. I think most of us have probably got, at least 2 or 3 sites today, a banking site or, some other type of investment or, it really, our Microsoft in many cases has been configured to deliver a secondary factor of authentication to a mobile device or through an email or some way. We recommend mobile over email. To make sure that not only do I have the username and password associated with the account that I'm trying to get into, but that I also have something that only I would have, my cell phone or my the ability to enact a second factor of authentication there. This is key because for a while the vast majority of compromises came because credentials, just the username and password, had been compromised. They've been gathered somewhere, they've been guessed, they've been purchased from some other breach off of the dark web. So multi-factor authentication is a key piece of improving business security practice. It's one of the 5 best security practices. And what I'll tell you is it's really interesting. Passwords, they simply don't get it done to the point where, I've seen, we do business with a lot of vendors and organizations that require us to exchange security information in terms of, do you have practices in place to be secure about your data classification? Do you have practices in place to be secure about your password management? What protections do you have in place, surrounding server functionality? Or, do you have a password manager? Do you have endpoint protection? Do you utilize a SIEM or a SOC? All of those questions we have to exchange. But what's interesting is that, we found some of the questions about password rotation are no longer really that important because of the additional protections that you can put around identity. Because multi-factor authentication really helps lock down, that someone who's attempting to access a resource is who they say they are. The password itself, in some cases, I've seen passwordless access to different types of resources. So, maybe if you forgot your password, someone can send you an email with a hyperlink or send you a text message to the cell phone with a hyperlink, and clicking that will get you in the same way that having entered your username and password correctly would have in the first place. So a secure password is, it's important, but it is really, it really is a backup to making sure that you have really adequate multi-factor authentication protections in there. Now, in some cases, some things require authentication that don't have the ability to do multi-factor authentication. So if you have accounts that log in automatically, service accounts on your servers, those types of things, you still want to maintain password complexity rules there. But realistically, multi-factor authentication for user access is a great way to protect identity. So I got a story from back in my days in Louisiana. I'm in Austin, Texas now, but spent 20 years in New Orleans, Louisiana, and grew up a couple of hours west of there in the heart of Cajun country in Lafayette, Louisiana. While I was there, I worked with an oil and gas products distributor, and they ran one of our ERPs. They similar to the mortgage story. They had a phishing event. And hackers got onto the network, and again, they just did reconnaissance. They learned not only who this distributor did business with and how they received payment through ACH. They learned the names of all of the employees there. They learned the names of some of the kids, and then they were able to take that information. They mimicked the tone of the communications in the company. They referenced some of the family members or children that had been referenced in previous emails, and they got out there, they created some rules that would hide any responses to the email that they sent out. And they executed a campaign where they said, hey, we're going to change banks in a couple of weeks. And then they came back with a status update, in a week. Yes, we just want to let everyone know that the accounts are all set up and we're ready to go. When we go to receive all of the payments for this month's invoicing at the end of the month, we're going to be having that. We're going to be having that go to our new bank account. So this went out to all of the customers who were going to be paying by ACH. And when they executed the payment, that all of their recurring payments kind of came due at the end of the month. All of that month's payments went into a bad account, and the money vanished again. I think that was at $160K. Of damage to that organization when they stopped telling us amounts because their lawyers had recommended that they take a different path here. So that was a pretty impactful event for them, and it was interesting for us to participate in. We weren't handling their security at the time. We really were their ERP partner, but we were asked to come out and kind of help them try to work their way through this. So continuing on with some of the best practices, I'd say. Use an endpoint protection product that really protects against ransomware and malware. And I'd say also has a managed component to it. So again, in our managed services practice here, we are partnered with SentinelOne, who we think is a really good product for managing endpoint security. They were kind of one of the early adopters of the idea that they're going to monitor behavior instead of just monitoring, kind of like the old Norton antivirus or Symantec antivirus, just monitoring for viral DNA, right? And in the past, I'm sure all of us on the call probably remember having to update the virus definitions, right? And that was basically the snippets of code were kind of uploaded into this encyclopedia, dictionary of potential bad programs, and then that software would look for those snippets anywhere on the hard drive. And when it found one of the snippets, it said, hey, what we've got here is a virus. I recognize it from the snippet that I have. And then as time went on, those evolved a little bit to be able to say, well, it's close enough to the code that I have in the dictionary that I can identify this virus and quarantine and do whatever. But over time, the threat actors and the authors of this type of malware got smarter and figured out ways to hide the code in different files and then bring it together to execute, or to do things like encrypt the data or encrypt the programs before they could be detected. So Sentinel-1 really, it uses behavioral analysis and is able to determine, if a program is executing and doing something like encrypting unexpectedly. It has a whole host of things that it can do in terms of behaviors, not just in terms of code snippets. So in addition to that, the managed components, so all the alerts generated by Sentinel-1, for us, they go up to the Sentinel-1 Security Operations Center, and those guys are evaluating all the alerts that come up there. They use a bunch of tools to do that. I mean, they got some AI help, and it's not one person reading line by line. But what's nice is that it's 24/7 coverage, and when an alert indicates an active threat situation, we'll get a phone call at 4 o'clock in the morning. We'll get a phone call at 8 o'clock at night. They will escalate to us the minute that one of those alerts indicates an active threat situation, and we have the ability to go in, help isolate it, help remediate it. And I'll talk a little bit about the right steps to take when you find yourself in a cybersecurity incident situation. So I think the next practice is probably going to be common sense to most of us. Back up your data. It's the in case of emergency break glass way to fall back. And it's really key. Make sure that not only do you have your data backed up, have it stored in a place that's not necessarily connected to or visible to the network. Because what we've seen happening here in the past couple of years, the criminals got smart, right? When they do ransomware attacks, one of the things that they'll do is they'll encrypt the backups first. Because if they encrypt the production system first, it sets off all kinds of alarm bells. Hey, my application stopped working. I can no longer run these Excel spreadsheets, or I can no longer access, these critical documents. They appear to be encrypted. Let's go to the backup. So the cybercriminals said, well, let's prevent that from happening. We'll encrypt the backups first and then encrypt the production environment, so that it's been I've heard many a time that, when we went to the backups, they had been compromised as well. And we didn't have a fallback plan. We ended up having to pay the ransom, and those ransoms aren't cheap. So having a good, robust backup system, disaster recovery system with backups stored in a place that has some type of air gap or some type of separation from the network is a key part of a protection strategy. And then have a plan in place, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But it's the worst feeling in the world is understanding that you've been compromised. And I'd say, that's followed up closely by realizing you don't know what to do in the event of a cyber attack. And that can be mitigated by having a plan in place. What do we do in the event that we have a compromise? What do we do if all of our servers are taken down? What do we do if it's just a couple of rogue machines on the network? Having a plan in place and knowing what you're going to do when the red light goes off and you're ready, your call to action, it is key. I'd say that some of our customers take this even further than, simply having a plan. And they have the opportunity to perform what's called a tabletop exercise, where you actually go through a potential attack and then try to figure out, if this happens, then that happens. Where do we not have full details in our plan? Where do we not have an appropriately planned response? Where do we have risk associated with, with a cyber attack? And this brings up another interesting concept. As we talk about cyber security and cyber risk and cybersecurity events, there's almost a guarantee that at some point you will be faced with some type of attack. Now, whether it's successful or not may depend on how much planning you did beforehand. But equally as important to preventing the attack is minimizing the attack after it happens. So in the industry, they talk about boom being the cybersecurity event itself, right? And then if you imagine, everything that happens before the actual event, the way to protect, the way to prevent, the way to stop an attack from being successful at all is left of boom. But equally important is considering what happens right of boom, or after someone gains access to a system or network. And that means figuring out ways to harden your network internally, to protect your resources internally, to help minimize the damage that someone could do if they actually get into the network. And so those right of boom practices are also, kind of part of maybe not the incident response plan, but part of a written information security policy and a really well thought out strategy. So here's a story. I promised in my LinkedIn post today to have a few juicy stories to share in today's call. So here's a light manufacturer. Someone there, they received an invoice. Someone in the finance section received an invoice, and when they opened it, it said, "Hey, you can't view this invoice, or you can't view this document without enabling macros." And so, what do? Hey, I need to see this invoice. We need to pay it if it's the case. So they enabled macros, and they didn't really see anything untoward happen. Maybe they saw a couple of flickers or something, but they went ahead and went about their business. They looked at the document and said, "I don't recognize this vendor. I don't recognize these charges. This must have been sent to us in error," and went ahead and deleted it and went about their business. So a couple of days later, what starts happening? She starts seeing all these little files pop up and realizes that her system has been encrypted. And as a matter of fact, that spread throughout the entire network, and ransomware hit them pretty hard. So what I think is a really interesting detail for this particular story is that the ransom, the ransom demand came in at $750,000. And, everyone in the front office said, "That is ridiculous. There is no way we can afford that." They responded to the criminals and that's absolutely beyond the pale. There's no way we can afford it. And the response they received from the cybercriminals was a copy of their own profit and loss statement, indicating that they could, in fact, afford that. And from there, they really didn't have any recourse to get their systems online, but to pay the ransom. So pretty impactful. So I think the last topic that I really want to cover is just talking about a robust security culture in an organization. We talked about people, process, and technology. We talked about how important it is to educate, but it's also important to talk about just being aware that the actions that any one person takes, each of those people should be aware that the actions that they take, can have a massive impact on the business. And so, helping instill in each of your team members that has access to technology of any kind within your organization, making them aware that they have a responsibility to contribute to the overall security of the organization. That's really the key. And helping to strengthen your people's understanding that their actions, that the things they do with their laptop or their cell phone or their email account can have a massive impact to the business. Folks are receptive to that message. They understand once it's been communicated to them. Maybe a few stories like the ones I've told today can be shared with them. This is a real important step into making sure that your business is overall secure. So really important thing to do is help establish that culture. So make it a priority, and that really should come from the top down as a communication that, hey, overall, we understand, that we are doing business in a world that has, had an evolution of cybersecurity threats, even in the past 5 years, and management, employees, from the warehouse, to the main office and the corner office. All of the folks that are in the organization should be aware of the risks that are faced. So train them a little bit on cybersecurity best practices. You can use a platform. You can send out, you can custom, create internal videos. You can find YouTubes, but communicating and having some conversations around this in the workplace is a really good idea because folks can point out examples of what they might have received or not. Our organization internally and for our managed services customers, we use a really nice product for protecting the email inbox. Here's a good example of how, we try to adhere to this. We have the security awareness training platform, as I said earlier, but we also have a product that gives us a big red button in the upper right-hand corner of our Outlook that says report phishing. And what's nice about that product is not only does it give, there's a little bit of pleasure in punching a big red button, I'll tell you that. But honestly, it gives our staff, all the action team members, the ability to report something that they think is suspicious. And what's nice is it goes through an instantaneous review process. And if it is found to be suspicious, the product actually takes that email out of any other inboxes in the action.com domain where it might be, to help protect others. So, our staff understand that when they click the big red button, that not only are they protecting themselves, and they're protecting their colleagues, and they're protecting the organization as a whole. They're contributing. So that's part of this idea of a security culture that I think is really important. So provide training and education, give them the ability to report suspicious activity, not just through a big red button, but maybe give them a clear path, or even some acknowledgement when they do successfully report something. Hey, you know what, we had a cybersecurity risk here, but John, he sent the email to IT, or he sent it to Action, and our engineer there came back and said, absolutely, that was a threat, and great job avoiding that. Hey, just a small acknowledgement of folks who are doing this is not too bad. If you use the platform, there's kind of a ranking of folks who have executed successfully the quizzes or the trainings or those types of things. But realistically, a culture of acknowledgement, encouraging folks to report, if you see something, say something, those types of things really strong. So, and then when folks don't do it quite as well, there needs to be a conversation with them. And again, I think demonstrating the risk that their actions can hold for the organization as a whole, how they can damage themselves, how they can damage their colleagues, or damage the places they work by being careless or not adhering to the security practices that you've documented or put out there. That can be a real issue as well. So I've got another story. We got an architectural engineering firm. This is a great example of social engineering. So we had a young man that received a call. He was fairly new to the organization. He hadn't been there quite a year, and received a call from the IT department that basically said, hey, listen, we've determined that your email account has been compromised. And it was a big enough organization to where, not everyone, that was kind of a production or frontline person knew all the IT folks. And so this consultant, he got the word, this call said, hey, this is so-and-so from the IT department, and, we've discovered that your email address has been compromised. You're not in trouble yet. So, and, that automatically puts up the hack. I was like, oh, okay, so I might get in trouble if I don't take action now. He said, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to reset your password and make sure that you're, in a good spot. I'm going to send you a multi-factor authentication request right now to your cell phone. You just read me the number off of there. We're going to take care of this for you. And so sure enough, the guy said, okay, hey, happy to help, and gave the multi-factor authentication and gave the cybercriminals access directly into the tenant. So I'll say that this story doesn't end in the $750K ransomware event that the last one did, fortunately, because this organization had some other protections in place. They had a watchful eye on their Microsoft 365 tenant, and I think the bad actor was coming from Eastern Europe. So they were able to determine that hey, the geography is not what we expect for these particular logins. The timing of these logins isn't what we expect. And they were able to shut it down without a major incident. But I thought the social engineering aspect of that was pretty interesting in terms of how folks can trick users, even the most well-meaning users, into providing information that can compromise the organization as a whole. So I think the last topic that I have here is incident response. And so I kind of want to approach this from a couple of different angles. So one is, if you find yourself in a cybersecurity incident situation, one of the things that you should do is, the first thing you should do is you call your IT provider, your IT department, whatever IT support resource you have. You need to get them, working on the technical side of the program. That should be your absolute first call, no question about it. And as much as I hate to say it, your second call should probably be to your attorneys or to your legal counsel, so that you can understand what your obligations and what your risks are, regarding the cybersecurity incident. If it turns into, a full-on compromise, you may have certain legal obligations. In each of the 50 states today, there are laws that have been enacted surrounding, breach if you have been breached. And there's a slightly different legal definition in each of the states, about what constitutes a breach. But you probably have noticed that I use the nomenclature of, cybersecurity incident, and I try to stay consistent with that because it typically doesn't engender the same obligation or the same legal requirements that breach does. In the event of a breach where customer information or personally identifiable information, PII, they call it in the industry, has been accessed or compromised, there can be an obligation, a legal obligation to send out an email to everyone who might potentially have been impacted. And we probably have all been the recipients of these types of letters, given the number of breaches that have occurred over the past few years. Some organization that you may have been affiliated with probably sent you a letter that says, hey, we regret to inform you that, on this date, at this time, it appears that certain levels of access were granted or, achieved by non-authorized personnel. It is possible that your information was accessed or compromised. The information that was accessed or compromised might include your name, address, social security number, whatever. So, those types of breach letters have to go out if in fact a breach occurred. So making sure that you kind of understand what your obligations are in terms of the law and understanding what your risk is are really important. And then following that, it is my hope that each of you has a cybersecurity liability insurance, and you might reach out to those folks after you talk to your lawyers to make sure that they are aware that you understand whatever obligations you might have in order to be able to make a successful claim should you have damages from the event. And this is really important, beforehand, that you have met all of the requirements of the policy. So this is one of the services that, that we find ourselves asked to provide again and again here at Action. Our customers are actually, that have cybersecurity liability insurance. Those insurance companies are getting savvier and savvier about ensuring that, ensuring with an E, not an I, making sure that their customers are doing enough to protect themselves to help avoid a potential claim. So they've come out with each year greater and greater detailed lists of the solutions or the products or the practices that need to be in place in order for the customer to protect themselves. And they can only make a claim if they have those things in place. So that can include ensuring multi-factor authentication is in place, ensuring that there's a robust backup and disaster recovery strategy, ensuring that there's password management, ensuring that there's adequate endpoint protection. Maybe it's full-on managed detection and response with a history of alerts, so that a forensic analysis can be done and the origin or the first spot where the bad actors gained access can be identified and it can be proven that that problem was remediated. So making sure that you're up to speed or up to date on all of the protections that are required by the insurance policy is key. And then, contacting them in the event of a breach to make sure you understand what your obligations are there and to go through the process as you need to in order to be able to make a claim, once the dust settles. So on the technical side, the team that you contacted first, whether it's Action, whether it's your internal folks, the first step is to identify, all right, are we in an incident or not? And sometimes it's not as cut and dried as you might expect. Sometimes you see anomalous behavior that causes you to think something may be going on. Sometimes it proves out to be something nefarious, and sometimes it proves just to be something kind of unexpected. An update, caused some behavior that we didn't expect. A machine rebooted unexpectedly, or services stopped and started because the requirements changed because of this update. So identify it and then determine what is the scope, how big is this, how bad is this, what was impacted, what systems have been touched, what's been accessed. Then contain the incident, right? Figure out where has this gotten to and how can we shut it down? How can we, do we need to pull those machines off the network? Do we need to, shut them down until we, can kind of, put them back up in an isolated spot so that we can kind of go through and address exactly what's been compromised, what needs to be fixed, and of course eradicate the threat. And I've seen that take a number of different forms, whether it's running through the operating system to determine what files have been touched or changed within a certain time frame, or that don't match the expected values and sizes and those types of things. It could be rebuilding the servers from scratch and bringing over only data files, those types of things. So all of those are tactics or techniques that might be used to eradicate the threat. So identify, contain, eradicate, and then a couple of steps post-mortem, you have to recover. So figure out, how do I get systems up and running again following the compromise or following the incident? And that's, again, restoring data from backups or, creating new servers and migrating the current data over to them after it's been sanitized. There's a whole, mess of ways that you'll need to do that to bring yourselves back to fully functional after the threat itself has been eradicated. Maybe you put some additional firewall things in place. Maybe you're running a DNS filter to help ensure that, machines aren't accessing sites or resources or sending data to places they shouldn't. And finally, learn from the incident. So that written information security policy and that incident response plan that we talked about a little bit earlier, those are items that can be informed by the experience that you now have about how someone might access your network in particular. And so you can take that, you can build yourself a stronger plan, and you can build yourself a stronger path to getting out of the woods if something like that were to happen. So I'd say, cybersecurity is a really important, it should be a priority for every organization. And whether it's something that you currently have in your sites, the fact that you're here today means that you're probably interested in either finding out more or confirming that the things you have in place are a step in the right direction. But the things that I've shared with you today are pretty basic. But if you haven't taken some of those steps, those 5 best practices, those are things that really you should have on your radar. Our guys can help. Our engineers can help you out. I'd love to hear from you if you're considering doing that. So again, people, process, technology, help educate your staff, help educate your team members, help them to build that culture of curiosity. So if they see something that doesn't look right, or if they're asked to provide something they're not quite sure is correct, or even if they get that strange phone call from the IT department that says they're not in trouble yet. How do they get curious and ask questions? How can they ask? How can they challenge that caller and say, how can you prove to me that you are who you say you are? I don't want to provide that information. Is there a number at which I can call you back through the main line? Is there an extension where I can get to you? Challenge and prove just curiosity. It's a good thing to instill in the team members. So implement multi-factor authentication. This is a step that once folks have become accustomed to it, will really strengthen the security of all of the resources that you access using identity. And I couldn't recommend that strongly enough. Get yourself some managed detection and response, endpoint protection. I would encourage, getting a solution that not only provides protection on the machine itself, but provides, the sending of alerts to a security operations center, a SOC, they call it. And then, with the ability to, or internally, some folks use an internal security information events manager, a SIEM, they call it, to track those things, and then use, analysis tools to pop alerts when something anomalous occurs. Either way, depending upon the size of your organization, one or the other of those solutions might fit pretty well. And then, back up your data. Make sure you have a good plan, store your backups separate from the network, and have a good plan in place in the unexpected and unfortunate, event that you do have something happen. I'd say, recently we watched a presentation from another one of our partners, and they had a slide that really resonated with me, and I wanted to change it a little bit. It said, sometimes fall comes early, sometimes fall comes late, but fall always comes. And so it's a kind of an unfortunate reality in the world we live in that if we don't have some kind of protections in place, it is extremely likely, almost inevitable, that we'll have some kind of event, in the future. I tried to change it to say winter is coming, but that's a little personal, funny there. So anyway, I think I think that brings us here to the end of our presentation. Hey, security incidents are inevitable, but having a plan in place is invaluable. So hey, their solution resides not only in your technology, software, or your edge firewall is another, it can be hardware a little bit, I guess, but it's also that end user commitment. And I think, that if you take away a recurring theme here, it's, empowering people to be aware of how to protect themselves. All right, and that brings us to a few minutes for Q&A.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. That was one of my favorite webinars. That was a great presentation, Mike.
Thanks, Mars.
Yeah. Like you said, we have a couple questions, but if anybody else has any more questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A section and we'll get to them shortly. It looks like we have a couple that I can display for everybody. If it wants to work with me, here we go. We don't currently have cybersecurity insurance, but are thinking about adding it. Any tips on what to be on the lookout for in a policy?
That's a good question. That's going to be really difficult to answer. It depends a lot on the nature of your business, in terms of coverage, in terms of requirements. I'd say, make sure that you are protecting not just for loss of business, but for potential liability as well. I talked a little bit earlier about the fact that all 50 states, now have specific legal requirements in terms of what a company is obligated to do if it's, if they have responsibility for data that is breached or compromised or exfiltrated. And so there's some costs sometimes associated with that. And while it's unlikely, in some cases we've seen, I've been offered a year's subscription to a security monitoring service for my credit or credit monitoring service because I was a member of a website or something that got breached. So if your organization was to offer something like that because your customers have been breached as an offer, there's some costs associated with it. So I'd say, what I'd look for is appropriate coverage, and make sure that you consider all of the damages that you might experience if you were the victim of a cybersecurity attack. Both, again, in terms of loss of productivity, loss of reputation, loss of business, and then also if there are any explicit out-of-pocket costs for that. Make sure you're covered. I think one thing that I've seen is that insurance companies are growing more and more reluctant to write coverage of the ransom itself into the policy. The premiums are much higher for that. And so, like any insurance policy, you'd also want to be looking at, kind of the ratio of premiums, deductible, and coverage. So, and then determine, whether or not ransoms themselves, I mentioned that big $750K number here earlier. Make sure that if you want to be protected against that you have that inclusion, or at least ask your insurance provider about it. A good question.
Yeah. I have another one for you. I currently use Chrome to store all my passwords, but have been thinking about rolling out a password manager across the company to standardize. What are things that I should look out for when investigating solutions?
So that's a good question. And, there are a number of really good products out there. LastPass is one that we were considering moving forward with as a go forward, but they experienced a breach, and we moved away from them. I'd say one of the things that attracted us about LastPass, though, at the time, and about the solution that we're using today, Keeper, is that it has the ability to be centrally managed. So a lot of the password management tools that are available for either free or for cheap, they don't have a centralized management ability. And so having a centralized manageability, being sure that your IT department can potentially recover lost passwords in the event that someone leaves unexpectedly, that's really important. And then having one that does a good job of separating team members' personal password vault from the corporate password vault, so that they can keep all their personal stuff personal and maybe not give IT the ability to recover those. But the ones that are owned by corporate should be manageable and should be recoverable. So Keeper is the one that we use, and we think that it has a really nice functionality to address those particular requirements. But really, any of the password managers that are out there that are centrally manageable, I think is a good bet. And the other thing I think is just user interface, usability. If you're gonna implement a password management tool, make sure that it's easy to use for your users. The quickest way to have a tool like that not be used is to make it a pain. So, again, having something that can help automatically fill website forms and those types of things, but not storing them quite as insecurely as maybe Chrome might. And I'm not, trying to judge. The convenience of having your browser store the passwords is great. And they've added some security here in the past couple of years to the password storage in the browser. But really, having a good password manager is key. One of the cool things that it'll do for you is, it'll look at your passwords, find out if you have any repeats, advise you to change any repeats. It'll help generate really complex passwords to make sure that they're not easy for a brute force attack to guess and get into your account. And then they'll also investigate open stores of data that have been retrieved from the dark web. So, when there's a big hack, like the big Target hack a few years ago, whatever, and they steal a bunch of customer credentials, usernames and passwords, then they'll go sell them on the dark web. And, the FBI, when it recovers them, will put those into a bigger database. And then your password manager can go out and look at all of those stolen credentials and say, hey, you're using a username and password combination that was also in this one that the FBI recovered. That seems like it's old and hasn't been changed in too long, and B, a potential cybersecurity risk for you. So, hey, those are things to know about password management.
Awesome. I think that's all the questions right now, but if anything else comes up as we're wrapping up, feel free to give any more questions, anybody. But Mike, go ahead and keep going.
So, hey, I don't have a lot left. I know we're at time, and I appreciate everyone participating with us today. Where do we go from here? I know that myself and my team would love to hear from you. If you're thinking about taking some of these steps and you're not sure how to move forward, we can give you advice. We can give you assistance. We have a full-on managed security program that can help you put a combination of these solutions in place and help secure your business. So I would recommend. I ran out of time and I wanted to talk about that slide. I'm putting together another cybersecurity webinar on the cybersecurity framework and 18 controls that you should have in place. That kind of touch on some of the things that we talked about. It's like the 5 best practices, but it's broken down into more detail into 18 sectors. So here in the second half, we'll be putting that one on. Otherwise, just reach out to me. My credentials are on the screen right now. I would love to hear from you and talk through where you are today. If you feel like you're in a good spot, if you feel like you have risk, if you have a really good story for me, I love those in case you can't tell. And I look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mike, and thank you everybody for joining us today. And we hope to see you for this next really cool cybersecurity webinar coming up soon. So thank you, everybody.
Awesome.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Morris. Appreciate it.